Hello, welcome to the Mum Life Renewed podcast. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Sylvia, I'm your host. I'm a Christian woman, mother of two, and mum Santi coach. I'm on a mission to help Christian mothers who feel overwhelmed, exhausted, to start living life they love again. And on this podcast, I'll talk about all things motherhood, faith, identity in Christ, self-care, mental health, and so much more. Stay tuned for our current episode. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to the Mum Life Renewed podcast. I'm Sylvia. Thank you for joining me today. I'm continuing on the Wellbeing series, and on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about social wellbeing. Feel free to look back on the podcast for the other episodes. So, what is social well-being? Social well-being essentially is the quality of your relationships and interactions with others. It's also about, building meaningful connections, having a supportive relationship with other people, having a sense of belonging, and just, feeling, comfortable and valued enough when you interact with people, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, etc. And so, social well-being and just generally thinking about relationships is something that I've had in mind a lot, especially when it comes to friendships. The latter part of this year, I've really been reflecting on my friendships, and it's been a bit of an up and down journey. When I was younger in secondary school, I found it hard to make friends initially, but I was able to make friends. And I've noticed that in general, when I go to new spaces or new environments, it takes me a while to settle in, to form new friendships. That's just something I've noticed in general. And so I wanted to share today about, some of the lessons I've learned from my relationships and how I navigate my relationships in general when it comes to my family, my friend, my children. So when it comes to the children, something I've tried to do, it's not been great recently, but something I previously did was doing one-to-one time. Having dedicated time with my children to, speak to them about what's on their mind. Sometimes it was just to play a game, or sometimes we'll do family night, like movie night, games night together. And, one of the ways my children, both my daughters, like to connect with me is through hugs. And, that's my way of staying connected with them as a mum. I've also done the love languages test. So there is a children's version of that love languages test that I've also conducted with my children, just to help me to understand their love language, and in doing so help me to navigate how I'm going to, love them or show them love, because that's another way of being able to know, if you've never done a love language test, it's there's a free form online, and, you fill it in, but I think it's based on multiple choices, and then at the end it will tell you your love language. So for those of you that may not know what the 5 love languages are, I try to remember them on the top of my head. They are words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. So those are the love languages. I think it's great to, use the love languages to help you to know how you like to be loved, but then also how you can love others around you. So I would totally recommend it, just to kind of help you to, navigate your relationships, but then also to love on yourself. So that's how I navigate my relationship with my children. In terms of friendships, it tends to be more messaging my friends on WhatsApp. Occasionally I'll have a call with a friend, but most of the time I connect with my friends through WhatsApp, and then, have church friends, so we connect when we see each other at church. And my closer friends that I have quite a close relationship with but don't live physically close to me, I connect with them on the phone, and we just check in on each other once in a while. One of my closest friends, who's my best friend for 20 plus years, we tend to message each other kind of monthly-ish, and we make it a point, my best friend and I, we make it a point to do a date. So at least once a year, we'll meet up by ourselves and go somewhere without the children. Both of us are full-time working mums, and we do a best friend date every year, just to kind of stay connected that way. Because of how busy it is with our jobs and everything and roles and responsibilities, we found that that's our rhythm, but we kind of also try and meet up during the year with the children. So we'll meet up a couple of times a year with the children, and then we meet up together by ourselves as well. So that's just how I navigate some of my relationships with my family. I live close to my parents and siblings, so most weeks I go and visit my mum after church on a Sunday. So that's just an example of how I navigate my relationships, and that kind of keeps me connected to my loved ones. I'm also a part of WhatsApp groups, so I've joined several mum WhatsApp groups, and that also helps me to stay connected to other mums, to be able to learn from and share ideas and ask questions. And I'm not going to lie to you, being able to be part of WhatsApp groups has helped me maintain my sanity at times, because sometimes I'll just put a question in the group and say, has anybody else been through this situation? And there's always such great advice, and it makes me recognize and realize that I'm not alone with the experiences that I have, and, as a mum. And so, yeah, it keeps me going for sure. Another thing I've personally found that's helped me in terms of maintaining connection with other mums, even though it's online, is whenever I'm going through an experience, I will search that experience and I'll put the word mumsnet at the end. And 9 times out of 10, it will come up. So, for example, I felt I was really getting frustrated with laying out my oldest daughter's uniform. And I kept thinking, do I really need to be laying out every single item every single night? Because that's the mental load right there, of dealing with my outfit and 2 children's outfits every day, especially on a work day and a school day. And I looked up laying clothes out for school, Mumsnet, and lo and behold, there was a post about somebody saying, do you lay out your child's clothes? And there was different opinions, but based on that post and the responses that I found, I made a decision that I was going to put school shirts in the wardrobe for my child. I'll make sure that she had her jumper, her skirt, her tights at the beginning of the week, but she was responsible for making sure that she had all the items she needed for school in the wardrobe. She would go in the wardrobe and collect it, and that immediately reduced that mental load. So that's just a tip there if you have older children, to kind of teach them responsibility. So I'm going to share 3 key lessons that I've learned from all my relationships as a whole. We always hear communication is key, and, being able to understand the level of communication you have with different relationships is so important. So with my children, like I said, I've done one-to-one times, and I've played games with them, giving them hugs, and trying to understand their love languages so that I can communicate and love on them as suitable for them. And I've noticed that in the relationships where I don't have any kind of line of connection or communication, those relationships kind of tend to fade, especially with friendships. I would say I find that when it gets to the point where my friend and I don't communicate as much, we don't check in with each other, we don't send each other messages anymore, that friendship ends up fading away. And so, the level of connection and communication will determine how far that relationship goes. And so relationships, friendships especially, there's definitely seasons to them. And I've definitely been in friendships where I've been absolutely gutted that it's ended. But it's just that we end up kind of naturally communicating less and less. And then that friendship fizzles. And there are times where I'm like, why did that friendship end? Like, I don't even understand what happened. I don't know whether it was just because of different seasons or whatever else. When I went through my divorce, I definitely noticed a shift in my relationships. I had people show up for me in a way that I hadn't expected. And then other relationships that I used to have just suddenly fizzled, and there was no other communication in those relationships. So I, definitely recognize how communication in relationships will keep it going if there's no regular communication. And regular could be once a month, could be once every 2 months, it could be once a quarter. But if there's no line of communication at all, that relationship generally tends to end up fizzling. That's one of my lessons. The second lesson is the importance of discernment, especially when it comes to friendships. Some part of this year, I've tried to form new mum friendships to try and have mum relationships to people that would be a bit physically closer to me so that I could, connect with them, meet up with them. And I tried this approach by joining several mum apps, and I was chatting to one of the mums that I connected with on WhatsApp, and we'd arranged to meet up, and unfortunately something came up and I wasn't able to do the original date we'd set anymore. And then suddenly that fizzled out. It's just I suddenly got ghosted by that person. I do recognize around that time that I'd intensified my prayer life in general, and I'm wondering whether there was something going on spiritually that led that mom to then suddenly disconnect because their intentions weren't good. I have no idea. But when relationships suddenly stop, I believe that it's God's way of protecting me. And so, as hard as it is at that time and that sense of rejection that I felt, perhaps it was God protecting me. On the other hand, I've also been on a different mum app, and I was able to join a local mum group when I used to live in the Midlands. And that mum group was pivotal in helping me heal from my divorce because, it was quite fresh. It was like the first, the time of separation before divorce, and that mum group, being able to physically meet up with mums, and most of the time it was with our children, and speak to fellow mums and gathering at somebody's house and just watching a film and having snacks and drinks. That just helped me to be able to connect to other people and reduce the isolation that I was feeling during that time. So, there's such a contrast in how different friendships and relationships can form and how community can make such a big difference in helping, me manage my social well-being in general and keeping that connection. And I think my third lesson is the importance of forgiveness in relationships. One of my key relationships as a co-parenting, in my co-parenting relationship has been forgiveness. The ability to be able to get on with my ex-husband and be able to still co-parent in a healthy way is due to forgiveness from both our parts. You know, when the relationship broke down, there was a lot of anger, you know, and regret, and being able to work on my own journey through being part of a Christian coaching community, and making the decision one day that I'm just going to forgive has really been key in helping us maintain a healthy relationship. I have shared more on that particular story of forgiveness, and that is in an earlier episode that I shared on the podcast called Forgiveness for Your Sanity as a Mom, and that's episode 17. Feel free to go back and listen to that episode if you want to know more about that story. But I share this to say that the way you navigate your relationships and connections with other people is definitely affected by your communication, having discernment, and forgiving. I'm still working on forgiveness in some of my family relationships, and you know, it's definitely been a work in progress, and I believe in that God will help me to work on healing. But you know, when it comes to healing and forgiveness, you need to actively participate and be willing to make a decision to let go of the offense and the wrongs and the hurt and pain that you felt from somebody that's hurt you, because without that, you know, you're going to keep holding on to the anger and the bitterness and the resentment. So 2 scriptures on, you know, relationships that I love is Genesis chapter 2 verse 18, which says that it's not good for man to be alone. And Ecclesiastes chapter 4 verse 9 says 2 are better than 1. You know, I know there's been a lot of isolation and there's like a loneliness pandemic, and not everyone has a lot of friends. You know, maybe I might share on friendship specifically in motherhood another day, but try and connect to the people that you already have instead of looking for new relationships and trying to make new friends. You know, try and connect with one person in your life that you haven't spoken to for a while that you believe is a good person to be able to connect with. If it's a friendship or relationship that is unhealthy or toxic, that's different. But if there's someone in your life that you're not connected to as much, or you're not communicating with as much, that you would like to stay connected with, feel free to get in touch with them and build that connection again. You know, because I think having relationships in our lives is key to our better than one, you know, and connecting with the right people in your life can literally, you know, will make or break your life. So I think it's important to connect to the right people so that you can live a life of good social well-being. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and I look forward to speaking to you again next time. Bye for now. Hello. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Mum Life Renewed podcast. I hope it was helpful to you. I'm currently completing the Christian Mums Wellbeing Survey. Help me plan content for the upcoming year. I'd really appreciate it if you would complete it using the link below. And feel free to also join my WhatsApp group. The links are in the show notes. Thank you for joining. Bye for now.